the purpose of what we're making tonight is kind of twofold. It's an IEP parent portfolio, and it's intended, one, to be an education tool for parents, but also two, as a tool for you to organize all the paperwork that comes along with special education. And so, since we're a military connected community, parents are often moving in and out, and so this is just something to help support that process as you're coming to a new place or preparing to go to a new place. Another idea is for parents who come in and their students that are brand new to the special education process, kind of one of those welcome gifts. Welcome to special education. This could be a really great tool to give to parents there as well. So what we're going to do first is you're going to get a cover page that you can slip in that just says IEP Parent Portfolio. You're going to need a couple of different tabs for your notebook. The first one is going to be parent rights or procedural safeguards, however you want to write that down. And if you're not sure, it's actually this paper here. So it says procedural safeguards notice, so we're going to make a tab for that. We're going to make a tab for parent handbook. We are going to make a tab for IEPs. We're going to make a tab for evaluation reports. And then the last one that we're going to make is for doctor's notes or doctor's information. Restraint, seclusion paperwork, work samples, communication. The other one that I just thought of is progress reports. So as you get progress reports on how your student's making progress on their IEPs, there might be a spot for you to put those in. So really this notebook is for you as parents, and so you can tailor it to whatever makes the most sense. I'm going to go through just a couple of pieces of the special education parent handbook. I just want to call your attention to this amazing resource because there's a lot of really great information in here. In our handbook, you can see on the table of contents what is included within this. So I'm just going to read through these sections, and then I'm going to highlight a few things within the document itself. So, should my student be tested? Parent involvement tips, I'm going to go through a couple of those here in just a moment. Your parental rights and procedural safeguards, kind of the one-pager version of that is included in here, but you have it in its entirety as provided to you in the notebook as well. So you have the long version and the short version. What is an IEP? So if IEPs are new to you and you need to understand some of the sections and what they mean, a lot of that is kind of laid out for you within this document. Eligibility for special education services. So what types of eligibility categories are there to be eligible for special education? That's in here. What types of meetings might you expect when you attend an IEP meeting or an eligibility meeting? What kind of settings do we have? Early intervention services through preschool are just detailed in here. Transition services for students post-high school. The difference between 504s and IEPs. Who are all of these people? The more services your student has, the bigger the IEP meeting can get, and sometimes I've led IEP meetings where we had to find a larger room because there were so many people involved, which is a good thing, but it can be really overwhelming to a parent when they walk into a room and it's like, hi, welcome to this meeting. Here's 12 people that are here to talk about your child. So knowing who's there, I think, is a really important part. And I think one piece that's very helpful to our parent community is a glossary of terms, because we love terminology in schools in general, but especially in special education, as well as acronyms. So IEP, what does that actually mean? When we say all of those acronyms are in this resource as well. So I think it's really comprehensive and super helpful, both to our parents and even to some students that are old enough to really understand some of this stuff, what their rights are, and all of that. So if you could turn to page 4 in the Special Education Parent Handbook. I just wanted to go over a couple of really important parent involvement tips and just really emphasize how much our providers, our school district, and our schools really value partnership with parents in the special education process. It is so refreshing when we have a parent come to a meeting that has questions or concerns that they want to discuss. Parents that have actually looked at the IEP draft before they come and maybe scribbled question marks or notes on it, so that we know that you're really partnering with us and truly invested in the growth of your student. So the first one that I highlighted is just be present. COVID kind of made that challenging. We had to do a lot of IEP meetings over Zoom, but we're back in person. But one thing it has given us is a little bit of flexibility, and so we do have some parents that are just super busy that prefer to meet via Zoom, although this year we haven't had very many, which is kind of cool. I think it's always a better conversation when we have people at the table together. Communicate with the staff on a regular basis is super important, because the IEP meeting shouldn't be the first time that you're hearing certain information about your child. You should feel well informed on how they're doing in school, and so we welcome that communication. We always, at every meeting, are going to ask you, what are your child's strengths? What are your interests? What are their interests? And what are things that it's important for us to know about them? So just be prepared to speak about that when you come to a meeting, because we really value you. And we know and love your child. They're with us a lot during the day, but you're the expert on your child. And so just making sure that their voice is given to us through you is important too. And really, there is no question too small. I know that we really attempt, when we write these reports and IEPs, they can get really long and lots of terminology. We try at IEP meetings to make it more of a conversation with families and parents, and that is a two-way conversation. So making sure that you feel super comfortable asking questions is really important to us. We love information from outside providers, so if you've had any kind of testing done on your child, whether it's cognitive testing or behavioral testing or anything, occupational therapy, speech therapy, those outside reports help us, because we can see if they are getting outside services, what outside service providers are working on, and how we might be able to partner. We can also sign a request for us to talk to each other outside of school, so that we can really work together to help that student make even more progress, and providers love to do that. Advocates. This is huge, and especially if special education is brand new, making sure that you know you have the right as a parent to bring somebody with you to any kind of IEP meeting. And it can be an advocate from an agency, but it can also just be a friend or somebody that you talk to about the meeting before you come, and just say, hey, will you make sure that I ask these questions? Because sometimes that whole process can be intimidating to a parent. And we want to make sure that all of the needs of your child are represented and discussed at the meeting. So bringing in an advocate can be a really great thing. And it doesn't upset the school at all. We love that, because we want to make sure that you're leaving feeling like your child's needs are really being addressed. But it does help us if we know an advocate's coming, because then we can put them on our attendance sheet. We know to expect them, so we can have enough chairs in the room. So it really does help if we know ahead of time. During the IEP meeting, you're going to have a draft sitting in front of you, and so making sure to write down questions, asking questions is very important. And then this one's huge. Sometimes we're on a tight time crunch. We schedule several IEP meetings in a day, and there's a finite amount of time we have. And sometimes we don't have the flexibility of continuing that meeting that day. But if you as parent don't feel like all of your concerns have been addressed, you can ask for a meeting continuance. And so you can say, hey, I understand we're out of time, and we need to table the meeting for today, but I'd love to come back for a part 2 so I can make sure that we discuss everything that was on my list. You have the right to do that, and we welcome that. I'm going to move ahead to page 12 at the bottom, and that's just all of these people. And depending on the type of IEP and what eligibility category your student qualifies under, there could just be one person there, the speech language pathologist, or there could be a lot of people there. And so this list tells some of the most common people that can be at a meeting. So our audiologist, along with our teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. Sometimes a school counselor might be at an IEP meeting, an occupational therapist, a physical therapist. In our school district, most of the time assistant principals serve as the designee, so that's the person that is taking notes during the meeting, kind of runs the paperwork side of the house, and makes sure that all the signatures get collected that we have to get done. There will always be a general education teacher at the table. That's a requirement, and so that will always be there. Sometimes the school nurse might be there if the student has pretty impactful healthcare needs. There may be a social worker. There might be the school psychologist. Of course, the special education teacher, speech language therapist, teacher of the hearing impaired, teacher of the visually impaired, and then a transition teacher are some of the people that could be around the table. And so I just wanted to make sure to touch on that, because oftentimes that can be pretty overwhelming, or there can be questions related to who's there. Then I just wanted to show you the glossary on page 15, and then the acronyms on page 20. There's enough that it's several pages, so there's just a lot of terms in special education, and so we want to make sure that if you see something or hear something, you have a spot you can go to look that over. And if you ever come across an acronym or a term that's not here, that you're not sure about, if you read it in a report, please reach out to your service provider or anybody at the school, because they can help decode. It's a whole new language, right? We can help you decode it. And then the last page is around community resources, which has been a big part of the conversation we had today. And so a lot of these are the community resources that we would likely invite to come and present to us about what they offer. And every time I listen to the folks that are on this page speak, I learn something new about what they do. So I highly encourage you to come back for those. It's really beneficial. So really the last part I wanted to talk about, and then maybe just take some questions, is transitioning to a new school or away from a school. And Savannah over here reminded me of some really important points about that. So I think this is even more, this kind of a resource for you to just keep copies of everything. Of course, it's going to be in your student's cumulative file when you transfer to a new school, but I think it's so impactful for you as parent to have copies of every document related to an IEP and keep them. Sometimes the process of getting records to a new school can be a little slower than we want, and so we have to really track them down. And you know, especially as your student gets older, the part pieces might not all come at once. Oh, we need to see the eligibility report. Let's request that piece. They didn't give us that. So if you have it all as parent coming into a new school, I know the special education secretary at my school always smiles ear to ear when a parent walks in with a notebook like this and says, I am enrolling my student, they have an IEP, here's everything you need. And then that person takes it, makes a copy, and returns it to you. So it's a really great thing to do. I would even advocate before you even move to that state, if you know what school you're going to be attending, getting them the information sooner rather than later can really help them prepare for the needs that your student might have and make sure that they can meet those needs, but also allow you an opportunity to engage in conversation with that receiving school to make sure that they can meet the needs of your child. Because every state and location, as I'm sure our military families know, they might have services that look slightly different than here. So that communication, I think, is absolutely key. Sometimes a parent will come and say, hey, we're having a military move, or not even a military move, and we're moving in September. And this student doesn't have an IEP review due until May. So we do have parents sometimes that say, hey, I'd like to request an early meeting so that I can leave with the most up-to-date current IEP that I possibly can. As parents, it's your right to call an IEP meeting whenever you feel like it would be beneficial for your kiddo. So if you come and call and say, hey, I'd like to request a meeting before a move, you can do that. You can also say, hey, we're not due for a meeting until May, but I have some concerns and I feel like we might need to change a goal or add an accommodation to the IEP. You can request a meeting then too. We always welcome that. Every 3 years, we'll reevaluate to make sure the student is still eligible for special education, but every year, annually, once per year at the minimum, we'll meet to review it and update it. Have they met their goals? Do we need to create new goals? Do we need to move some of the accommodations around and just give it an overhaul, because kids grow and learn, and we want to make sure we're still challenging them to move to that next step.